In the recent election, we saw the increasing importance of minority voters, especially Hispanics. But you ain't seen nothing yet. We'll talk about that next on Global Perspectives.
This program is made possible, in part, by funding from the UCF Global Perspectives Office, the Global Connections Foundation, and the India Center at UCF.
This is Global Perspectives with Pulitzer Prize-winning commentator John Bercia.
Welcome to Global Perspectives. Contemporary American political discussions are increasingly being shaped by an expanding influence, Hispanics, the largest U.S. minority group. What does that mean for the future of U.S. politics? How might it affect key Hispanic issues such as health care, unemployment, and immigration? And what has been the impact of so-called voter suppression laws that supporters say are designed to prevent voter fraud and opponents say unfairly target minorities? Our guest today, Andres W. Lopez, has been deeply involved in the debate over these issues. A Harvard-educated lawyer from Puerto Rico, he was recognized by Poder magazine as one of the 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States. Hello, Mr. Lopez. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
What does it feel like to be named in the top 100 of something? That's such an exciting elite category.
It's always flattering. I think it's a reflection of work you've done, and I think it's certainly an achievement that anybody who is fortunate enough to be on that list takes as encouragement to keep doing what they're doing. And in this case, I think that the reflection is that, as you were just saying, I mean, Hispanics are becoming more and more a potent force in the political sphere. Now, according to the last census, we're talking about 54 million. 1 out of every 6 people in this country are Hispanic, and the questions abound as to what does that mean and how do Latinos fit into the American story.
Help us understand this phenomenon. I think there is a tendency among some people to see Hispanics as homogenous, and we know that's anything but the case. Help us dissect this issue and explain the different components.
Absolutely. Latinos are not a monolithic block by any stretch of the imagination, and in fact, the common misconception is that there are such things as Hispanic issues, that just by mentioning one issue, you'll be able to essentially address the issues of all Hispanics. The first important thing to note is that the issues that are important to Hispanics are important to all Americans: jobs, healthcare, education. And there are certain issues that are particularly germane to the Hispanic community, for example, the quintessential issue being immigration, which is more of, it's interesting because it comes up, of course, when you do polling of the Hispanic community, but it's not among the top issues. It is an issue where if you're a candidate aspiring to become an elected official, you do have to speak about it in a certain way that is sensitive to the needs of the community, because if you don't, then the perception will become that you will be less sensitive or less attentive to the needs of the community. So it is an important issue. It's not a defining issue in a way that, as I think the premise of your question suggested, people think, well, if I deal with this one issue, I will cover the entire Hispanic community. It's really not so. You've got, Cuban Americans, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, and Central Americans that all are defined by a variegated number of different issues, and it takes the an enlightened approach to really address those sub-constituencies, if you will, in a way that they will feel, you know what, this person, this candidate is really speaking to my needs. But at the end of the day, the story of Latinos is the story of America, and those issues, the issues that are important to Americans writ large, are the ones that are important to Hispanics as well. And consistently in the polls, those are jobs and health care. Without question. I mean, there's no special siloed set of issues that are only important to Latinos.
Now, how do you see this development affecting the future of U.S. politics? And obviously the entire group you're talking about isn't engaged in the political process and in all the same ways across the country.
It's really the main issue that we have to address. Basically, Latinos are a force, an incipient force that really hasn't achieved its own strength and power at the ballot box. And I think that we are close to reaching that tipping point. Certainly the level of attention that's being placed in the Hispanic community in this cycle is unprecedented. And if you think about it, I usually like to quote this fact to just show not just where we are, but the promise of the future. Think about it like this. Every month, every single month, for the next 20 years, every month, 50,000 Latinos will turn 18. And over 90% of those will be eligible to vote. So at some point, the numbers are going to be so overwhelming that if, when the real question that everybody's trying to get a handle on is, when does that translate into strength at the ballot box? Because the moment that it does, it really will signal a seismic change in American politics. And I think like every community, I mean, the issues that are important to that community will have to become important to the people who aspire to lead them, whether they be Hispanic or not. So I think that's the rub. We're at the point where Hispanics are clearly still punching below their weight in terms of what their potential could be. But aspirationally, we're heading in a direction that is inexorably going to lead to more Latino political power all across the country.
Can you identify any situations where they're punching at or above their weight, which are encouraging signs?
Well, I mean, look, I think that if you look at the Cuban-American community in Miami, it's a clear example of a community that's been able to harness their political power and translate it into something very specific. You have 3 congressmen from Miami who are Cuban-American. You now, of course, have 1 U.S. senator who's a Cuban-American. So certainly, Cuban-American community has figured out a way to punch above its weight. You look at certain places in Texas, for example, where we have Julian Castro, the first Latino keynote speaker at an American convention, and that state is showing signs of increased Latino voting potential. And again, I think it's really a question of time, and you won't just find isolated spaces in the country where they're punching above their weight, but rather it'll be something that seamlessly translates into just more electoral muscle.
You talked about how many more Latinos will be added and how many of them will be eligible to vote. And this reminds me of this whole question of the voter suppression laws. How do these work together, and what is your take on what's happening and what its impact is?
So I think what's happening now is that a number of legislatures across the country are dominated by one particular political party that doesn't really have the favor of the Hispanic community. And at least from my way of seeing it, this is one way to try to get minorities, particularly Hispanics, to stay home, not vote, or essentially get hurdles along the way, not different from the ones we've seen in the past for other communities, to try to essentially keep that vote down. If you look at numbers from the past cycle, I mean, 70-20 in favor of one party, typically the Democrats. So I think that it is a, and look, when you do, public policies across the country, you can argue both sides, and as a lawyer, you're trained to argue both sides. But here I think it's rather transparent that this is, it's not really meant to address an existing crisis, but rather a hope that in so doing, numbers can be kept down. And I just don't, I don't see that as a healthy way to really engage a group that, quite frankly, you're going to need to embrace, whatever party you are, going forward if you want to win elections.
You mentioned the Cuban subset within the Hispanic community. What are some of the other groups that are rising quickly in terms of population and influence? I'm thinking of Puerto Ricans in particular, but
absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's no question, there's no group that's being looked at right now in terms of its potential to become a real force in American politics than the Puerto Rican community. And in fact, the community's growth in the last 2 decades, and particularly in the last decade, in the state of Florida, and this sliver runs from Orlando to Tampa along the Interstate 4, it's now a sexy political buzzword. Everybody in the know wants to talk about the I-4 corridor. Well, Puerto Ricans in the I-4 corridor have an enormous potential force to decide elections because their numbers are just staggering. I mean, their population growth increase was 75% from the 2000 census to the 2010 census, meaning that they now are about 1 million strong in the state. And of course, you know, we're talking about Florida, which is the quintessential battleground state. So you might say that the Puerto Rican community is the battleground group within the largest battleground state in the country. And they really don't have an established voting track record to the point where you can easily tell which way will they go. And that makes it a very coveted group for both parties. And, you know, to be sure, they lean Democrat, but in terms of establishing a loyalty factor for generations to come, that hasn't been done yet. And that's the work that's really for the first time in this cycle. You're talking about an effort that's unprecedented in scope. And you know, going back to your question about the Hispanic community not being a monolith, there are issues that are specifically germane to Puerto Ricans. Of course, who all of them are American citizens by birth, right? So they obviously empathize with the immigration issue. They have friends and family and relatives who are affected by that. But they have issues of their own that touch them in very particular ways. For example, the question of the future of Puerto Rico itself. You know, and what will happen? Will it stay as an American territory? Will it become a state? Those are issues that if you're a candidate and you know to speak to that community in a skillful way, you're going to find a very receptive group that, again, is going to be able to allow you to talk about other issues in ways that will make you ultimately a more persuasive candidate.
Now, you're clearly part of the contemporary leadership group, but what about the leaders who will come after you? Obviously, there's a vested interest in ensuring that there is a strong succession. Are they coming from the legal field? Are they coming from business? Are they coming from all different sectors? And you know, when you talk to young people at colleges and universities, what's on their mind? Are they clearly inspired and ready to move into elective office?
Yeah, I have to tell you that is the most exciting issue that I see out there right now, because you know, the current generation of Latinos and Latino leaders in places like Orlando and the I-4 corridor, it's a group that has to they've had to face the staggering and sometimes dizzying pace of growth in a way that they really aspire to become leaders. But if you think about it and you look at the numbers, right now in Central Florida, we have 0 congressmen who are Latino or Puerto Rican, and no senators, certainly, who are Latinos or Puerto Rican. And I think that group is, in a sense, shouldering the burden, really making the sacrifice and paving the way for the next generation, where I think we're really going to see the tipping point of Latinos and Puerto Ricans in the I-4 corridor become a real potent force electorally. And it's really going to, I think, come hand in hand with the development of the young leaders right now who are seeing what is happening, who are seeing all this attention, and are going to want to become a really full part of the process. And that's going to result in Latino leaders, without question, that embrace and become part of the fabric of the community.
Have you found certain parts of the country where individuals, young people, are more active than other parts?
Oh, I mean, out there, out in the West, you just see just an amazing development in places like Colorado and Nevada and New Mexico. What I see is essentially a group of folks that is coming into its own, right? I mean, when I was a student, for example, largely, by and large, the national media was essentially black and white, spoken in binary terms. And the Latino community was largely invisible, even though it's been here since before Jamestown. But you wouldn't know it. And with the changes that the most recent census figures have brought about, it really has resulted in an energized group of folks, Latinos, just really feeling the potential of being able to fulfill their aspirations to the point where, you know, they now know that this is a country where they can become a Justice Sonia Sotomayor, or they can become someone like President Barack Obama. These aspirations are now within their reach, whereas perhaps in earlier generations, maybe they were told that that was not something that, you know, that was within their reach.
To what extent, in your opinion, have the news media contributed to this awareness of possibilities?
I think to a large extent, now the media gets it. You look at Time magazine and in its front cover, Latinos will decide the next president of the United States. There are untold numbers of Latinos who are looking at that now and saying, wow, this is very real now. In the same way that before Latinos were not as visible, I think now there's a concerted effort that will only increase to make sure that Latinos are more visible, better represented. And I think there's still, look, we're in a growing pains phase, right? Because there's still many laments that sometimes a portrayal of Latinos, whether it's in entertainment or in the news, is not often the most flattering or the most objective, and there's much to that. I think that as the media continues to evolve and continues to reflect, as it should, the changing nature of this country, there'll be no choice for them but to do, as you know, this recent example the Time magazine covered, but to illustrate that Latinos, in fact, are a force to be reckoned with, and that they're here to stay. So it's important to know what issues drive them and what's really important to them, what moves them.
And with the current growth rates, if we project to the middle part of the century, Hispanics are going to be determining leaders from president on down.
You won't be
consistently.
Yeah, you won't be able to really win many elections because by the middle point of this century, Latinos will be about, we're now at 54, maybe about 125 million. Usually those projections run short. About 1 in 3 people in this country will be Latinos.
I think a very important point that you've made that is worth coming back to is even though you're talking about a sizable group that has influence politically in other ways, we're not talking about a group that has its own set of issues.
Absolutely, and this has been demonstrated time and again, and we poll it consistently, and that's the really important thing to know, that there is no discernible difference in terms of the issues that go to the heart of the Latino community that is separate and apart from the issues that go to the heart of the rest of America. You know, jobs, healthcare. I mean, really, top issues are essentially identical. We all want to try to secure a better future for ourselves and for our family, and that's no different in the Hispanic community, nor should it be.
Are there any issues that are specific to the community that you would like to talk about that would help educate political candidates and others about what the interests of the community are?
Yeah, I mean, and we alluded to it briefly earlier. I think that an issue like immigration and really engaging in a comprehensive immigration reform is an issue that at times, frankly, both Democrats and Republicans have tried to accomplish as they recognize that it is a good thing to do for the country. We are now at a little bit more of a polarized time, and so we haven't been able to get to where we want, but that doesn't mean that there's recognition in both sides, which is what gives me hope that this is a salient issue, a salient deficiency that we need to address, because frankly, we're dealing with people who are American in every respect, feel American in every respect, except for the fact that, except in paper, as we like to say. And these people contribute to the country in measurable ways, and they absolutely feel American. We have to figure out a way to solve that problem in a way that helps both sides, if you will. And so one issue in which you can speak in a way that turns the Latino community off, even though it may not be the top line issue, is immigration. So for example, if you say, I'm going to make immigration laws so difficult so that you, in essence, feel like you have to self-deport yourself to go back to your country of origin, that is not just a turnoff on the immigration issue, but that makes folks who are Hispanic think, well, if someone thinks that way about that issue, will they be sensitive enough to understand my needs in other issues? So it's a very interesting dynamic because you can't really assume that this issue is the one that dominates all, but there are ways to speak to the community in ways that you convey a sense that you are sensitive to and embrace the needs of the community.
immigration is an American challenge. It always has been since the beginning, and everyone who lives here, except for those who are descended from the original residents of this country, has immigration in his or her background. So it's not a partisan issue. It's an issue that we...
It's the story of America, really. When it boils down to it, the current generation of Latinos who are immigrants are undergoing a story that is no different from the generations that have come before and have made this country great. And the great thing about the ascent of the Hispanic community in this country is that they're making America great, and they will continue to do so for generations to come, and that's how we want it.
You've been involved in education circles and legal circles and political circles, but what are you doing specifically to help advance the leadership, Hispanic leadership issue among young people in particular?
I like to go to colleges, high schools, and universities and really talk about my own personal experience now that some people see me as a leader, and really convey to young Latinos the idea that this is entirely within their reach. And, you know, I think that that's very important because when I was, of course, coming of age, there were certainly less folks who were able to make you know, to make that claim, or at least they were not as visible to us. And now that we've been, you know, someone like me has been fortunate enough to have these opportunities, which are incredible, I mean, once in a lifetime in many respects. One of the things that I make a point of is to be able to communicate to the new generation that not only is this within your reach, but you're actually going to make it better. And we depend on you to make it better because we are paving the way for you to make the American story even better. And so I take great pride in making sure that young Latinos see themselves very much in leadership positions and understand that it's not really something that would be a nice to have. It is an imperative if we are to make our country, you know, we're all striving to make our country even better. And they are, I want them to see themselves as very much part of that equation.
The people in leadership positions often are the connectors between a group such as Hispanics and the broader population. If you had a message that you could deliver in both directions that you felt would decrease the gap, build a bridge, if you will, what would you say to both groups?
I think the salient message is that because of the demographic shifts that we have seen, the story of Latinos is increasingly the story of America, and it's a good thing for both sides to understand that in a way that it's not that the story of Latinos as isolated from the rest of America is good for America, but rather the story of Latinos as integrated and enriching the country is something that's going to be good for all. So I think that the more that folks, and look, there are a number of people who get this, and this is obviously a very, very positive thing. The more that people understand that this is a reality, the better and the quicker that we can get to the job of, you know, figuring out how do we make this country even better. And I think that that's really becoming a pattern throughout the country because the country as a whole is becoming more diverse. And so our reality, especially this century, going forward, there's no point at which you can project forward that diversity is not going to be the norm. And to the extent that the Hispanic community is going to be leading the charge, we bear a special responsibility of making sure that we become enmeshed within the fabric of the entire country and really become, as you said, a bridge of sorts to really essentially embody the message that this is going to be a better country for it and that we're going to contribute in ways that are going to really push this country forward.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
And thank you. For Global Perspectives, I'm John Bercia. We'll see you next time.
This program is made possible, in part, by funding from the UCF Global Perspectives Office, the Global Connections Foundation, and the India Center at UCF.